Good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are, or what time of day you're watching this. I hope that wherever you are doing well and you're staying healthy. You're staying uh, well, and both physically, but also more importantly, spiritually well. And I hope that even though that this is kind of a uncertain, difficult time in our life right now. I hope that you are still maintaining your spiritual health, even though that we're not able to gather together and help each other. I hope that you are maintaining your spiritual health and you're helping yourself as well as you're taking care of your physical health all together. And if there's something I can do to help, if there's some way that some idea that you had that would really help you spiritually, let me know. If there's anything I can do to help that, I would really appreciate that. And as I'm trying to figure out how to help everyone and to maintain everybody's spiritual health and everyone to get the um, best that they can out of this situation. We're trying a lot of new things. It's a little bit of struggle to see what works, see what doesn't, but we're trying to muddle through it, and hopefully it will go all right. So I'm super excited. I've been looking forward to this lesson for several weeks now. It seems to get put off with the virus and the last lesson we had at the church building, and then I was gone last week, and we didn't have services, and then finally this week I get to talk about this lesson and start my introduction to the book of Genesis. The first couple of chapters in it, and I think Genesis is so key and so instrumental to our theology and our ability to understand why we are here, where we came from, answering the big questions of life, which a lot of people are asking right now, especially in times of crisis, in times of where there's a lot of uncertainty. People ask those questions. Why am I here? Where did I come from? Is there a reason that I am suffering, or that I'm sick, or I'm at home, or whatever that person may be going through at that time? Is there a reason to all of it? And a lot of people ask those questions, and Genesis can answer those questions. And we'll be looking at Genesis 1 and 2, and I think that's especially fundamental because it really starts the whole story. That starts the whole story of the Bible. And it's really the beginning. I mean, like, if you heard a Disney story, I mean, what kind of Disney story would it be if it never started with Once Upon a Time? Or a Star Wars movie if it didn't start with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? Those phrases represent and start the stories that they tell. And the Bible is no different. It starts with in the beginning. At the beginning of time, God created the heavens and the earth. God is the focal point of everything else that takes place. Everything else glorifies Him because He is our creator and tells us who our creator is. And likewise, and kind of to add to that, if you were the enemy, if you were Satan, if you were the devils, if you were his demons, what is one of the places that you would attack the most? If you didn't want people to turn to God and to trust in Him and His Son, where is one of the places that you attack the most? It would be the beginning of the story. Because if the devil can get people to believe that there is no God, that God didn't create you, that you serve no purpose in this life, then it's so easy. It's almost natural to believe that there's no Jesus, that God didn't send His Son to die on the cross for your sins. That really there is no sin. It's just however you want to live on this earth. And He's got you by defeating the first phrase of the Bible. And so that's why it's so key. And I am really excited to start this study of Genesis. It's not going to be a super detailed study. We're not going to look at everything that's in the book. There's so much, and we would be in there for years, and I don't want that. But we're going to look at some general highlights. What is this text, this passage, these chapters trying to communicate to us? And really, that's the first question I want to ask is why were these first two chapters, the creation account, uh, why were they written? What are these chapters trying to accomplish? And that's a very important question because sometimes we can draw some very wrong conclusions if we aren't careful because we are trying to make Genesis and the creation account, Genesis creation account, answer things that it was never really trying to answer in the first place. It was never trying to answer these questions, and we try to cram it to answer those questions. And so I think we should look at the view of why is this here? What was the purpose? Why did God give us this? And really, creation doesn't tell us, ask us, or this creation story doesn't answer the questions of how or when. And these are the questions that we want to answer as 21st century people. We want these questions answered. These are the foremost most questions that we want answered. We want to know how and when. We want to know how everything was created, and did God create the animals as the same He did the humans? We don't know. Jesus doesn't tell us how each individual creature was made. It doesn't tell us of anything of the creation of the spiritual realm or angels or the seraphim. He doesn't tell us anything about that. And he doesn't tell us how he individually created each animal, all the specific animals he created. He doesn't tell us that. Because that's not the question that Genesis is trying to answer. Neither is it trying to answer the question of when. That's a very particular one that people want to answer nowadays. When was the creation? When was the beginning of the world? And Genesis doesn't tell us. He doesn't. That's not a concern of Genesis. It doesn't give us a timestamp. It doesn't say in 10,000 BC. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. And really, in the whole Bible, God didn't care about when. He cares instead about who and why. And that's really the focus of Genesis, is the questions of who and why. Who created everything? Who is our creator? Who is this being that created us? And why? Why did he create us? Why are we here? What is our purpose in this world? It is not to answer the questions of how and when. And I think sometimes we try to make Genesis into a evidence book that is a detailed response to all of Darwin or Hawking's arguments about the age of the earth and about everything that all the atheism or Darwinism arguments that could be found, and we go Genesis and we try to defeat those with Genesis 1. And I don't think that's the purpose of Genesis 1, nor do I think that's the best place to defeat those arguments. In the later lesson, actually, I would like to look at some of the arguments against evolution, against Darwinism, against Hawking, and really look at those specific arguments. I think you can find a lot in creation, and I would like to do that in the future, but Genesis 1 and 2 is not intended for that. Instead, Genesis is to answer the questions of who and why. So let's look at that. Who? And it's important to remember that Genesis is a response to other theological and creation stories of the day. So if you don't know, Genesis was created with the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, kind of known as the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Jewish Old Testament. Most people think that Moses wrote all 5 of these books, sometime either in the wilderness or at Mount Sinai or somewhere in between, sometime when they were spending the 40 years in the wilderness. And God, I guess, gave him an account of this creation story. And so it's important to note that there were a lot of other written creation stories in that day. You had the Babylonians, you have the Samaritans, you have the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Grecians, and many, many, many others with their own stories and their own creation accounts and their own theology of who was God and where did they come from. Because all people are actually trying to answer the story of why are they here? What is their purpose? Who created this? Did it just come out of nothing, or did somebody create it? Everybody's trying to answer those questions, and many other pagans were trying to answer those questions as well. And many of these other creation stories were written before Genesis was written. Now, obviously, the correct, true story, which Genesis recounts for us, was obviously happened before them because the other ones are false. But other nations had their stories written out long before Genesis was actually written down. And so, what God is trying to do, especially for the Israelite people, is to combat some of the uh, theological errors. Um, and if you look at those stories, in most cases you will find that the humans were made accidentally or made with no purpose. They were just kind of happened to be made. To gods clashed, and there came humans. Or there's a great earthquake, and then humans came up. Or there's a great something, and humans were accidentally made. And they had no purpose in making them. And you also find in common with all these other pagan stories is that there were many gods, because one god would not be powerful enough to make everything that people could see around them in that day. And then you also see that these gods are little better than humans. They make the same dumb mistakes that humans do. They have jealousy, they have disagreements, they're petty, they fight all the time. And so if you go read these great Greek stories, or these Egyptian stories, or these Mesopotamian stories, you'll find that they act no different than just really powerful humans. That's how they act. Um, and the Bible and the Genesis story of creation is a response to him. God is one God. He is one, and in him everything was made. And so we see his power, and this creation counts tell us of the greatness of God. We see his power. He makes everything in the universe with just the word. He breathed out, and everything was made. He creates, and it's really interesting that he creates light before he creates the sun and the moon and stars. He is light. He creates light. We see his care in telling the world his great this great world that he has created. How he just takes so much care in everything that he's made. He doesn't say, "Well, that was okay," or "That was all right." He made sure that everything was made until it was good, until it was perfect, till it was complete. And then we also see that he expressly made human beings to have a relationship with them. And he made creation and animals and nature for mankind, for us, so that we can have the blessings of God. But he created mankind to have a relationship with him. And that he didn't just accidentally create us, or he just threw us out there and said, "Go fend for yourselves." That he has a keen interest in our life and wants to have a relationship for us. And he made us for a specific purpose. And that is the God that we serve, and that is our creator. He's so unlike any of the gods of the pagan religions of that day, or even the gods of today, whether that be atheism or any of the other quote unquote gods of the day. Um, our God is so superior, whether that be materialism or power or whatever people seek and make their God today. our God is so much better. And Genesis recounts that for us. But it doesn't just tell us who made us, our creator, telling us about our creator. It also tells us why. This may be even more um, of interest to more people today. Um, if you look um, at Genesis chapter 2, it lists the purpose of mankind and tells us why we are on the earth. Genesis 2 is the creation account, but it's from a different perspective. It's from the perspective of mankind. And so it has the various relationships that mankind has with our creation. In chapter 2, and by the way, if you have time, I would encourage you to read chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Genesis. I just don't have time to read both chapters right now. But go ahead, you can pause this video. That's a good thing about technology. Can't really pause me when I'm there Sunday morning, but right now you can pause the video, go ahead, read chapter 1, chapter 2, look at the creation accounts and what God is trying to tell us through those accounts. But in chapter 2, it's kind of written from a human point of view, and it shows the relationship mankind has with various aspects of creation. And chapter 2, verse 4 through 14, it shows the relationship we have with plants, that we were created to tend the garden, and the garden and plants were intended to help us and give us life, and it is supposed to be a symbiotic relationship. And verse 15 through 17, it shows our relationship with God, how God gave us rules and we are meant to respect him and give him glory and honor. And that is the reason that we are here. And then in verse 18 through 20, it tells us about a relationship with the animals on the earth. We are to have dominion over them, but we are also to care for them, and we are to give them fair treatment, and we're to treat them as God's creation that we've been given charge of. And then finally, in verse 21 through 25, God gives us, or Genesis 2 counts our relationship with each other between man and woman, and the relationship they have between each other. And kind of just to sum up that whole chapter, it's really summed up in Genesis 1, chapter 20, verse 26 through 28. If you want to read this with me. Then God said, let's make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his image, and in the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And so this, God lays out why man was created and the purpose and job man is to have on this earth. And he's, after creating them and saying we made it in our image, in verse 28, he says he blesses them, and he gives them 3 charges, 3 things that man's supposed to do. He said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's 1. To subdue it. That's 2. And have dominion over it. That's 3. Those are the 3 charges that man has. Let's break those down one by one. So let's start with the second one first, to subdue it. Now, the question is asked, well, to subdue what? What is God giving Adam and Eve the charge to subdue? Well, it'd be the earth, because it's easy to forget, but the Garden of Eden was just a small section of the earth, relatively. The garden was relatively very small, and that the earth was untamed, and it was harsh, and it was everything that is today. But the garden was the sanctuary of God. It was part of his kingdom, and the garden was fruit-bearing, it was good, and everything in it was so good and therefore man. And so God gave charge to Adam and Eve to subdue the earth. Like slowly by slowly, God's garden and God's kingdom was spread over the entire earth. And then you couple that with his first charge to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Of course, kind of the first thing that comes to mind is to have babies, have children, to fill the earth, but also to fill it with his image. Because if you look at verse 27, it says God created man in his own image, and he emphasizes it again. In the image of God, he created him. So it's not just that man is to have babies, it's that man and woman, Adam and Eve, were to grow God's image and spread God's image on the earth. They were to spread the garden, spread the kingdom of God, and to fill it with God's image. And not just physically, not just to physically have babies and have children, but to spiritually, that their actions and the actions of their children and then their children's children, everyone from then on would look and act like God, that they'd be love and full of care and everything that God is. And then finally, the last charge is to have dominion, which that is kind of a poor translation, in my opinion, because in chapter 3, after man had sinned and got kicked out of the garden, God placed an angel in front of the entrance to the garden that had a flaming sword, and it says that the angel was put there to guard the garden. That same word for guard there is the same word that they translate dominion. And so really, I think that's more accurate because it's to guard the garden, to guard all the creatures in the garden, and to guard everything that is in the earth. Well, guard it from what? And I think it is to guard it from sin, to guard it from evil, to guard it from everything that sin would bring into the world: sickness, death, disease, evil consequences for other people's actions, everything that comes with sin, to guard against it. And so we kind of see this purpose that God's created man to grow God's kingdom, to fill God's kingdom with his image, and then guard his kingdom from sin, from evil, from everything that would come against it. And that's the kind of purpose of mankind. But he doesn't just say, that's your purpose, good luck. He also has this introduction into our Sabbath rest. Jesus tells us about our Sabbath rest, this Sabbath that we can look forward to. And this is really cool. I want you to look at this. This is the 7 days of creation. You can find this in chapter 1. Day 1, create light. Day 2, the sea and the sky. Day 3, dry land. Day 4, the luminaries, which is the sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, the fish and the birds. And day 6, land and animals, including human beings. And then day 7, the Sabbath. This is the creation. But as you can kind of see how they created, in order they created, day 1 is light, and then day 4 is like the corresponding day for that. God creates light, and then he creates the beings, the luminaries that create light. Day 2, he creates the sea and the sky, and then day 5, he creates the fish and the birds that go in the sky. And then day 3, he creates dry land. And then day 6, he creates the land animals and man that are to be on land. But if you notice, day 7 doesn't have any corresponding day, which tells me several things. One, it's kind of the awesomeness of God that there is no realm or place that could encompass and keep God, which is really cool. But 2, that is the most important. Yes, man was kind of the apex of the physical creation of God, but the Sabbath day on day 7 was the actual apex of creation. On day 7, said God rested from all his work. He created the Sabbath. And he created this place that in the garden that was supposed to be a Sabbath, a place where man and God could commune, that you wouldn't have all the worries and stresses and the anxieties of life and the work of life, that you would have a place where you could just be with God and you could be in his presence and everything would be right. But sadly, that went away when Adam and Eve sinned. But even when God created the nation of Israel, brought them out of the land of Egypt, and brought them to Sinai, one of the commandments he gave to Israel was that they would have a Sabbath day. On the seventh day of every week, they would rest. And on the seventh year of every seventh year, they would rest the entire year. And on the seventh year of the seventh year, they would have a grand rest where a lot of things would happen. Slaves would be free, debts would be forgiven, all land would go back to their original owners. And so this was a big thing, that they can have this day once a week, once every 7 years, that they can just be with God. They can pray, they can fast, they can commune with God. They don't have to worry about work. They don't have to worry about the things of this life. They can be with God. And God specifically created that. And he said that if you do this, I will make your crops grow to make up more than enough for the year that you didn't work, or more than enough for the day that you didn't work this week. He said, I'll bless you for it. But he created this day for his people because rest is a good thing. And it may be surprising enough that, or it wasn't surprising enough that the Jews and the Pharisees turned this great gift that God had given them into a rule to follow. And they made all kinds of rules about what you could do on the Sabbath and what you couldn't do on the Sabbath. And if you could get your ox out of the ditch if it was in peril, but if it wasn't, then you had to leave him there. If a building or a wall fell on a man, then you could recover enough brick to see if he was okay. And if he was okay, and he would be fine until the next day, you had to leave him there. But if he wasn't, then you could get him out. Like all kinds of stupid rules like that. And there was all kinds of ways they made it into just a checklist. And it was nothing that it was supposed to be. And that was one of the reasons why Jesus healed people and did miracles on the Sabbath. He wasn't just saying, oh, look, it's the Sabbath day. It looks like I should go stir up some controversy. I should do this great thing. Instead, he was saying that I am going to return the Sabbath back towards God and back to its people, back to what it was intended to do. And that's what Sabbath was all about, to be with God and to be with his people, God to be with his people, and to have that place. And it may be surprising to hear, but we have a Sabbath today that we are looking forward to. Hebrews 3 and 4 talk about this in great detail. I encourage you to go turn and read through it. But this is kind of the conclusion. In Hebrews 4 verse 8, for Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later on. So basically saying, if the promised land had been the rest, if Joshua had led Israel to the rest that God had promised them, then there would not be another day later on. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God, for us. For whoever has entered God's rest, has also rested from his works, as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter his rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. This is what we are pushing for as God's people, to be with God, to enter God's rest as he also rested from his works. That is what we are pushing for. And let us not, and he's encouraging them in verse 11, that no one fall in some sort of disobedience, no one fall to the wickedness of the devil, but strive to enter the rest, to strive to enter heaven. Because heaven is our Sabbath. It's a place where we can be with God, where we won't have work, we won't have hard labor, but we will not have any sorrow or tears or sickness or crying or death or any of the anxieties or worries of this world that you may be right now dealing with. The coronavirus, the uh, maybe you have some older parents or some older people that you care about and you're worried about them, or you may not be able to see at the moment. All that will go away. All death will go away. All sickness will go away. Everything that we have to do with this life will go away, and we can just enjoy being in the presence of God. That will be a wonderful day. And that is what Genesis previews. It previews that rest, that Sabbath that we can have, where we can just be in the presence of God. And we can learn about Him and love Him and receive His love to us. And really, that's what Genesis is all about. It's about our Creator, and He tells us why we are created. He tells us about our Creator and how awesome He is, and how He's created so much for us, and His power, His love for us. And He tells us why we are created. We are created to grow His kingdom. That is our purpose on this earth, to grow His kingdom, to make more of His image in this kingdom, to convert other people to be like Him, full of love and grace and goodness and kindness and mercy and self-control. Those are the kind of people that we need to be, and we need to teach other people to be. And then guard against sin. And then once we've done that hard work, that labor-intensive work that we have struggled with, each one of us struggle each and every day, we will enter His Sabbath rest. We will enter into the rest that He awards every one of us. That once we in heaven, we can just bask in His glory. We can sing praises to Him, and we can honor Him, and we can give Him all glory and honor that we would love to give Him. And I think that's a worthy goal to reach for, where we don't have to worry about everything that we have to worry about in this world, financial problems or sickness or death or anything else, but we can just worry about being in His presence. That will be a great day. And so I hope this is encouragement to you. I hope this has been able to uplift you, and hopefully will carry you throughout the rest of your week. Keep this in mind. Genesis is a great book telling a great story. It's just the beginning about why we're here and what a great God we have. So I hope you keep this in mind, and thank you so much for enduring through this time that's a little bit different, a little bit awkward. I'm working through it too. It's a little bit different from what I'm used to, and so I'm having to adjust. And so thank you for your patience and your grace as we go through this. I hope you have a great day and you keep God first in your life.